What's going on, guys? K-Pine here and welcome back. And yes, that's right, I'm bringing you all another Silph video. With this being the last season of Silph, and since I recently got a 6-0 sweep, I wanted to at least bring you one more of these types of videos while I still can. This tournament was held in the OK Silph Traveler Support Discord, or OKC for short. I absolutely love competing in these tournaments, as not only are they fun battles, but the whole thing is really well run and it's full of amazing people. Now, for those of you who don't know what Silph tournaments are, they are competitions held based on a specific monthly meta. This month's happened to be the same as a Silph factions meta, that being Arcana. And it's kind of ironic because in factions, I played in the other meta as a catacomb specialist. But for these specific tournaments, they are done in a Swiss style format, where as each round advances, you'll get paired up against someone who has the same amount of round wins as you. Whoever has the most round wins at the end is the victor, where individual battle wins are used as the tiebreaker if needed. These are also done in a show 6 pick 3 style, which I'm sure many of you know about, where you choose 6 Pokemon to bring with you to a tourney, and you'll then pick 3 of them that you think will do well against your opponent's team. You'll then play 3 battles and win the matchup if you're able to win at least 2 of those 3 battles. Alright, with that description out of the way, we're going to hop right into it against my first opponent, Dr. Skillet. Now, upon first look at these two teams, I can see that my Kofa Grigus is just extremely safe. Whether that's going to be on the lead or a safe swap, my opponent doesn't really have an answer to it. Their only real answer is going to be Jellicent up energy, or Alolan Marowak up energy. Pelipper is going to be a baiting game, so on and so forth. But just overall, my Kofa just seems extremely strong. And throughout this entire tournament, Kofa is a very good pick just in general. Other than that, I can see that my Pelipper is going to do well here too. Their only real answer to that is going to be their Jellicent or Ferrothorn if they're running Thunder. It was kind of a coin flip if Ferro is running Thunder or Flash Cannon in this meta, as they both have their good uses. But if it is running Flash Cannon, that makes it much better for me because Hurricane's able to hit really, really hard. And my Jumpluff as well looks good. I just need to watch out for their Alolan Marowak as well as the potential Jumpluff Mirror from their end. And looking at my opponent's team to mine, there's nothing that I'm really too worried about because I have decent answers to their Alolan Marowak in my Kofa, my Pelly, and even somewhat of my Tyrunt. Their Jumpluff, my DD can handle, my Tyrunt can handle, my Kofa and Pelly can handle. The only one that could potentially give problem to me if it's able to get a decent energy advantage would be their Ferrothorn. Alright, getting to the first battle, we lead Tyrunt into the Shadow Alolan Marowak. Now this is a pretty decent matchup for us, as these Dragon Tails absolutely chunk the AWAC, as well as we have access to super effective Agent Power. They can hit for super effective in return with the Bone Club, and even though Tyrunt is extremely glassy, Bone Club is a terrible move, so it only brings us down to about half HP. We bank all that energy and swap into our Kofa, which is a perfect answer to this Metachamp. And my opponent's actually just throwing power-up punches right here, which is kind of crazy because I have no reason to shield this. So instead, I'm just going to load up to 100 energy, throw this Dark Pulse when I get to back-to-back, take out the Metachamp, and now I have a ton of energy stored to face whatever my opponent wants to come in with. Then bring back in the Shadow AWAC. I'm going to throw 4 Shadow Claws for good timing, then go for this Dark Pulse to either take out the AWAC or get their first shield. It does end up getting their first shield, and now I'm going to combo play with my Tyrunt to guarantee the KO or their second shield. I get their second shield. Now they're going to swap into their Ferrothorn. And Ferrothorn can't really bullet seed me down from here. It can, but it's going to have to take a massive amount of damage in the process. And my opponent doesn't want that to happen, so they're going to end up throwing a Power Whip here to take out my Tyrunt, or a Mirror Shot. This one's actually running Mirror Shot, so they get to save a little bit of energy to take out my Tyrunt. And now here I can just come in with my Kofa. I have 2 shields. I will shield this just in case it is the Power Whip. It is another Mirror Shot. Luckily, no debuff. So now I'm going to throw this Shadow Ball to take out the Ferrothorn. And now from here, I can safely shield this and just Shadow Claw all the way down and take this game, letting Pelly ride the bench on this one. Now next battle, I do lead Jump Bluff here, as since they led the Shadow AWAC, I'm not really expecting them to lead it again game 2, but they do. And that's perfectly fine because I built my line ABB to a Shadow AWAC, meaning I can swap my Kofa in here, which has a positive matchup. And again, since Kofa is an extremely good safe swap here, I have a fantastic ability to take switch and then align my Pelipper to that Shadow AWAC. I am able to get the first shield with the Shadow Ball, go for Shadow Ball number 2, which does get their second shield. And unfortunately, because of that, I'm going to fall just short and being able to take switch advantage. But I do have 2 shields to 0. And Pelipper can put in so much work in this end game with 2 shields. I'm essentially just going to bring Jump Buff in here, calling that they're not running Ice Beam to just tank all of that energy. But my opponent actually hard swaps out into their Shadow AWAC. So now I'm going to counter it with my Pelipper. Throw this Weather Ball before they get to another Shadow Bone to take out the AWAC. See what my opponent comes in with, if they're going to show their third, which at this point I'm most likely guessing is Pharaoh, and it is the Ferrothorn. So I'm going to throw my Hurricane right away, which is on good timing as well. It does massive damage to the Ferrothorn. I will give up a shield here to respect the potential Thunder. And it is the Thunder, so that's a fantastic shield. And now I expect somewhat of a combo play by my opponent. So they come in, throw one more Hex. I'm able to catch onto my Jump Bluff. And from here, this match is pretty much over, because I can take out their Jellicent with that Energy Ball. And this Ferrothorn cannot farm me down with Bullet Seeds, as I'm able to get to this Acrobatics to KO the Pharaoh. Next battle, since that line worked really well against a bad lead, I decided to run it back again. And my opponent safe swaps their Shadow Jump, and I'm able to meet it with my Pelly. Pelly can easily tank one move here, so I'll let the Energy Ball go through. It does hurt, but now I'm going to overfarm and throw this Hurricane to see if my opponent wants to go down a shield or not, or let it go. And they are willing to give up a shield in this situation. So because of that, I will give up a shield in return. And throw this next Hurricane right away to take out their Jump Bluff. And it ends up getting both shields. And that I'm kind of okay with, because I can let this go and just get farm on my Kofa. Because again, they don't have a good answer to my Kofa. So getting all of this energy on it is going to be very, very helpful. As you'll see here, they hard swap in their Jellicent to avoid being farmed down, but that's not going to help them, as the Shadow Ball is just going to do so much damage. And I'm going to be able to Shadow Claw it down before they get to a Shadow Ball of their own. Opponent's waiting the clock here, see what they want to do. They bring in the Medi. This Medi is not going to appreciate this Shadow Ball either. Almost one-shots the Medi. Able to Shadow Claw it down all the way. And then Shadow Claw the Jump Bluff down. So we're able to take that game 3, take that match, and take the battle 3 games to 0. GG's to my opponent. Getting into the second round, I'm up against Warrior J-Mac, who's actually running the Mirror team, where except for his anti-flyer, he's running Shadow Aggron, while I'm running Tyrant. And in comparison to this, Defense Deoxys does very, very well against his line. Absolutely destroys Aggron. Does well against Jump Bluff since it can hit for super effective with the Rock Slides. It wins all even shield scenarios against the Shiftry. And again, super effective Rock Slides for the Pelipper. I just have to watch out for the Kofa. So as long as I have a game plan for that and the Defense Deoxys Mirror, I should be okay. As well, my Kofa is looking pretty safe on this team. It just has to watch out for the shift tree. And other than that, my Pelly is looking good as normal. Even if it gets stuck in a matchup against a Shadow Aggron, I can get to 2 Weather Balls before they're able to farm me down with Rock Throw, with Smackdown I should say. So they are forced to give up a shield, and down a shield in this cup, giving energy to something like a Kofa, a Shift Tree, or even a Tyrant for that matter, is kind of dangerous. Yeah, let's hop right into this one. So in the first battle, I lead Pelly into Jump Up. This is a pretty dominant lead for Pelipper here, as I am able to one-shot with the Hurricane, and I can survive any one-charge move from the Jump Bluff. And my opponent's surprisingly staying in to get off some chip damage first, and they're actually going to land that energy ball and stay in. So I'm going to overfarm a ton, throw this Hurricane right before I get to 100 energy, which one-shots the Jump Bluff, takes it out, and now they come in with their own Pelipper. I do go for a Weather Ball bait right here, expecting them to shield to respect the potential Hurricane, and then I can swap out after this matchup and store a Weather Ball for later. So I do get that shield, store that Weather Ball, and now I come in with my own Kofa, who is able to outpace to the Shadow Ball before my opponent is able to reach a Hurricane of their own. That does force my opponent to give up their final shield, and now here at this point, I could respect a Hurricane, but I decided to let it go. I feel like Defense Deoxys could close out from here if needed. Even if it is their own Kofa, I do have that Weather Ball stored on my Pelipper, so I should be fine. And my opponent actually just goes straight Weather Ball, is able to win CMP to take out my Kofa, but I have a shield up, and now I can just commit to the counter farm down. I can let this go, as this is only a Weather Ball. They weren't able to reach the Hurricane. And now I'm going to see what my opponent has in the back. Thankfully, it's not the Kofa, and it is their own Defense Deoxys. Again, since my Defense Deoxys looks good against their team, that means their Defense Deoxys looks good against my team as well. So I was expecting it to come this first game. I am able to land that Hurricane, and that puts me in a very good spot here. As I do respect shield this, I could have let it go because I would survive it, but I do have a shield, might as well use it there. And down goes their Defense Deoxys and their Pelipper, as I'm able to take game 1. Moving the second match, I decided to switch the order of the line around this time and go DD in the lead, where if DD is met with their Kofa, I would go into the mirror of my own and essentially I would be behind a Shadow Claw, but the Shadow Claws do add up both ways. And like I said, DD does win all even shields against the Shift Tree, but I decided to give up a shield of my own right there, as I wanted to preserve some HP, predicting that my DD could put in some extra work in the back. But they come in with their own Kofa, they make an adjustment, and they bring their Kofa to counter my DD this time, so nice play by them. So I decided to actually stay in instead, because I don't want to go into the Kofa mirror down a shield and behind energy. I decided to call a Dark Pulse. Luckily it is, so I'm now able to store a Shadow Ball and swap it to my own Pelly. Now this is looking a little tough for me, as I am down a shield in these mirror match scenarios, so I'm going to have to work my way up from this one. Thankfully, I do get the Weather Ball bait, and now I have another decision to make myself. I call the Weather Ball, and that's going to help out tremendously in this matchup, but it's still looking a little rough because I unfortunately do have to shield the next Weather Ball. My only saving grace here would be hopefully I can get another Weather Ball bait and reach this Hurricane in time, but I don't. I end up losing CMP to the other Pelly as they reach their Weather Ball. Now I can throw this Shadow Ball to take out their Pelly, and this is going to be very, very close. Those are both low, and it actually ends up being a simul KO. Very fortunate that one. I had to play that one out a little tricky. So if you don't know how ties work in Silph, it essentially just counts as a null match or redo. You get to pick different teams, different lines, and play it essentially as a brand new game, or that one never happened essentially. Next battle, I decided to leave the DD on the bench, expecting them to bring the Kofa, and I didn't want to risk my DD getting lined up to their Kofa again. And fortunately for me, it did work out, as they do bring their Kofa and I line it to my Pelly. I am able to get the shield with the Weather Ball bait at first and then land the Hurricane to take out their Kofa, which is absolutely fantastic. And now I'm going to commit to the Hurricane here to force my opponent to throw and waste their energy. I don't want to settle for a Weather Ball, because then my opponent could overfarm, and I also don't want to swap out because I want to get my Tyrunt aligned to this Pelipper as I'm resisting those wing attacks. I throw a little bit of odd timing right here just because I wanted to guarantee this move, get this move off before they reach another Weather Ball. My opponent does have a Shiftry in the back, and now this is going to be a little interesting as I have my own Kofa in the back. So I will shield that Leaf Blade to throw this Dragon Claw and hopefully get their shield. Thankfully I do, and now I'm in a very good spot because Kofa is able to survive a foul play from a regular Shiftry and get to a move. As we'll see here, Shiftry hits very, very hard, but as we all know, Kofa is extremely tanky, just barely able to hold on, get to the Shadow Ball, and take game 2 as well. Now we're going to head into the third match, and in this matchup, I decided to lead Jumpluff because Jumpluff can get a shield or switch against basically everything on their team, but my opponent reads that. Nice job to them, and they lead the Shadow Aggron. But now they counter swap their own Kofa, and that's fantastic because I can get 2 shields or guarantee switch here. So it looks like I'm gonna throw off this next Dark Pulse, see if my opponent wants to give up their second shield, which they do. So now my opponent will be able to maintain alignment, but I have a shield advantage, and Jumpluff is extremely thick. I'm just going to use it as a damage sponge here to tank Shadow Ball after Shadow Ball or Dark Pulse, and now a Shadow Ball that my opponent throws. And I'm just going to commit to the Fairy Wind down, leave with 100 energy or close to it. But my opponent doesn't let that happen, and they actually give up switch. So now I can throw that energy ball, get some chip damage against the Pelly, and I can let this Weather Ball go. I'm not in any threatening range from it, or I could shield. I do actually decide to shield that because Shadow Aggron with fast move pressure, I didn't want the smackdowns to become an issue. So now I have a ton of energy. I can land 1 Ancient Power, 2 Ancient Powers, and this should just about take out that Shadow Aggron. 1 more Dragon Tail does it, and then we're going to be able to farm down the Kofa and take game 3 as well. So we take the overall match 3-0 and move on to the next round. GG's to my opponent. We're getting into the third match. Looking at the teams, my Jumpluff looks extremely safe here. Gets to hit for super effective against the Shiftry. Haunter is very, very glassy, cannot be able to tank in acrobatics. It also can hit back for double super effective with the Ice Punch, but Jumpluff is able to tank one of those moves. Gourgeist, acrobatics for it. Tyrunt, we're able to win the zeros as we do hit for neutral with our energy balls. And Jumpluff just has to watch out for Shadow Aggron. But ProfLowery is running a very, very spicy pick in a Latios. I think Latios is the only Dragon Breath user allowed in this cup. You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but the Dragon Breath pressure is just a very good idea. I never thought of that, but it's a very good idea considering it does extremely well against Tyrunt, and there are other glassy mons in this cup such as Shiftry, and Pelipper won't appreciate it either. Other than that, my own Tyrunt's looking good. I just need to keep it away from the Latios. Somewhat neutral to the Aggron, and my DD does well in the zero shields here. Would just need to keep it away from their Gourgeist. And let's hop right into this one as well. Getting into game 1, I do lead Jumpluff into the Latios, so we get to see the Latios in action. And I do lead the Jumpluff here because, as I said, it has very good matchups in the Zero Shields, always being able to guarantee switch advantage or shield advantage. And Latios is an extremely glassy Pokemon, so I do go for the Energy Ball bait here, expecting them to shield, and luckily they do. And actually, I'm just going to go straight for the Energy Ball again. I know that this would do some hefty damage regardless, so it does force their second shield. My opponent committing both of their shields to Latios. Latios does have access to Dragon Claw and Luster Purge, and Luster Purge hits extremely strong. So I do call the Dragon Claw bait there. Fortunately, it does only happen to be the Dragon Claw, and now my opponent is able to counter with Shiftry. I could shield this and take out the Shiftry, but instead I decide to get farm on one of my back two mons, as Kofa did its job by luring out the Shiftry. And especially with these two shield advantages, I'm pretty confident that my own DD is going to be able to close out this game, especially since they do not have a Kofa of their own on the team. Unlike Kofa, Haunter can get absolutely one shot by a Psycho Boost. Back in comes the Latios. I will commit a shield here. I do get baited, so very nice bait by my opponent. And now this next shield's going up right away. I know it's going to be the Luster Purge 100%. So my last shield does get taken. I am able to counter down the Latios and leave with a ton of energy. Now we get to see what my opponent has in the back, and it's their own Aggron. So I'm in a fantastic spot, as these counters are double super effective. Rock Slide is resisted, but look how much damage these counters do. Just need to make sure I throw on good timing so my opponent isn't able to catch. Rock Slide does take out the Aggron, and I leave one more counter away from a Psycho Boost to then finish off the opposing Shiftry. GG's on that one. Matchup 2, I decided to lead Jumpluff again. It worked out pretty well last game, so if it ain't broke, why fix it? Except this time I do decide to swap out my DD for Tyrant for extra fast move pressure. And since I am seeing the Latios on the lead, my Tyrant gets to avoid this, which is very, very nice for me. So last time I baited the Energy Ball, this time I go straight for the Acrobatics. I am able to force that shield and survive that Dragon Claw and get off another Acrobatics. So now I'm able to take switch and shield advantage, or switch advantage. My opponent decides to give me switch and shield advantage here, which is perfectly fine. And I bring in my Tyrant here. I'm predicting it's something that my Kofa will be better up against in the back. So we're going to throw this Ancient Power when we get it. This will bring the Gourgeist pretty low, put it into Dragon Tail downrange, but not before they make it to a Shadow Ball. So I will save my shield for my Kofa, as again they have a shield of their own, and make it to this Dragon Claw against what unfortunately is a Shiftry. As even though I do get that shield right there, I wasn't able to get any Dragon Tail damage off against the Shiftry. So now the Shiftry is not in Shadow Ball range, and they will outpace me to 2 moves. So my only win condition here is calling a Leaf Blade, but my opponent smartly goes for the double foul play instead, knowing that they can guarantee the win that way. GG's, and that is going to be my first loss of the tournament as we head into a decisive game 3. I decided to play it more safe this time, go for a more neutral lead in Kofa, because I'm not really expecting them to lead the Shiftry. And it ends up being a decent call, as they do have Shadow Aggron, of which we severely outpace. My opponent calls the Dark Pulse bait. Very risky call, but it paid off for them, except that I was going to be able to farm down in time. So now they have to save swap out into their Shiftry, and we have the perfect answer to Shiftry waiting for it in our Jumpluff. We take that foul play no problem, throw off this Acrobatics, which would take out their Shiftry. They commit their first shield, and I still don't need to shield here because I can survive that foul play, but I decide against it. feeling that Jumpluff could potentially have some play in this end game, as it could be their own Gourgeist in the back, the same back line that they ran last game. But in this situation, I do let the next foul play go. My opponent tries to go for a snipe. We're able to hang on, reach the Shadow Ball. That does massive damage to the Shiftry. And that's a resisted move. That's pretty crazy. Shiftry goes down and ends up being a Latios in the back. And this isn't a very good matchup for Tyrant on even shields. But when we're up a shield, it is very good for us, because look how much those Dragon Tails do. We're able to take out the Latios and take the third game. Therefore, the overall being 2-1 as we move on to the fourth round. GG's to my opponent. And in the fourth round, I'm up against Kaizo, who's running a team of Kofa, Shadow Venu, Tyrant, Mew, Malamar, and Gyarados. So against his line, my defense Deoxys is just going to ride the bench. It doesn't have really good matchups here. Gyarados has super effective Crunch, and the Dragon Breaths add up, while I have the resisted counters, and then the Rock Slide is super effective. But by the time I get there, I'm just going to be taking a lot of damage in the process. Malamar has the foul plays for super effective. Mew has the Shadow Claws that add up. They have their own Kofa, which is walls my DD, and they have a Venu, which is somewhat neutral. Shadow Frenzy Plant, it's very, very hard, but so does the Psycho Boost in return. And really, DD's only good matchup is Tyrant, but I do have decent answers for that elsewhere. Otherwise, on my team, my Pele doesn't look very good either, as again, they have the Gyarados. Kofa's neutral. Mew has access to Wild Charge. They have a Tyrant. My own Tyrant is kind of alignment based as well, so really my only safe options are my own Kofa, Jump, and Shiftry, so I'm going to have to play around with that a little bit as we head into game one with the Kofa Mirror. I decided to leave Kofa as it is extremely neutral against her whole team. Even if they lead the Malamar, which does have access to foul play, Kofa can take a foul play, and Kofa actually wins the ones and the twos. The twos is bait dependent against the Malamar. In this matchup, I am able to get a shield with the Dark Pulse bait, and I'm actually decided to take my shield advantage and let it go, because this is farm down range for the Shiftry. You may think that it's not, but Shiftry, these snarls are hitting so hard. So I can shield once and commit to the farm down, or I can throw another Leaf Blade right before they get to their next Shadow Ball, which I do. I decided to play it a little safe, preserve some HP, as I still leave with a move stored on my Shiftry, and nothing on his team really wants to take any moves from Shiftry, not even his own Tyrant. As I'm going to be firing off this first Leaf Blade, does some massive damage to the Tyrant, and I actually win CMP over their Dragon Claw for the next move. And my opponent, actually, maybe I don't win CMP and they just got an invisible sneak there, or they stopped tapping to potentially watch a catch. A little weird visual, but either way, we're able to take out their Tyrant, bring in our own Jumpluff, and they have their Malamar in the back. And even in a zero shield situation, Jumpluff wins this. So up a shield, I'm looking very, very good. And my opponent realizes that, so that I don't even throw a charge move, as this next Energy Ball will take out their Malamar as we take game one. So next battle, I decide to run the same three again, as they are my safest option, just this time switching up the order, putting Jumpluff in the lead. And I am able to catch their Malamar, which is a really good lead for me. And they safe swap into their Tyrant. I don't have a fantastic answer for a Tyrant safe swap, so I am going to stay in and chip with this Energy Ball first. And since I do get the shield from my opponent, I'm perfectly fine staying in here again. I will tank the super effective Ancient Power, but I will be able to get to another Energy Ball of my own before I'm able to get farmed down. Does massive damage to the Tyrant. We snipe to get a Shadow Claw advantage. If my opponent brings back in the Malamar, again, we are able to survive a foul play from this range, given that we are basically full health. But my opponent decides to come in their own Kofa down a shield and behind a Shadow Claw. And because that's the back line they are running, down a shield with my own Kofa have an advantage, this game's pretty much over, as I can save both of my shields for the Shiftry. They bring in a Malamar. I will have to give up my shields here to respect the potential superpower, but really these Leaf Blade just do so much damage, as they're not able to get to enough charge moves in time, as this Leaf Blade takes out the opposing Malamar. And then from here, I can comfortably get to another move to knock out the Kofa and take game 2. And I don't know if I've mentioned this yet. Just in case I haven't, we play all 3 matches in Silph regardless of how the first 2 go, because all 3 affect your rating. If you win 2, if you win 1, if you win all 3, they all have different weights to your ranking. And in the third match, I decided to go back to my game 1 line, as I said previously, it was a very, very safe line, giving me a lot of flexibility and options to play out of different situations or flip things around based off how my opponent plays them. So I do survive that Dragon Claw, and here I do make it another Shadow Ball. A little bit of misplay, should have thrown the Shadow Ball, but because I don't think a Dark Pulse KOs from there, but luckily my opponent does end up giving their final shield. So now I can bring in my Jump Bluff to tank this energy. I will give up a shield right here because Ancient Power does a lot, but I get baited, which is kind of unfortunate. And my opponent does hard swap out of their Tyrant into their Kofa, and I have the perfect answer with my Shiftry. I think I've gotten lucky, fortunate, and gotten my Shiftry onto their Kofa all 3 games. So I'm going to overfarm as much as possible, get to this foul play to take out their Kofa. See if my opponent comes back in with a Tyrant or reveals their third, and they reveal their third being that Malamar. So opponent has run the same line all 3 games like me, but in a different order as well. First Leaf Blade does massive damage to the Malamar. Second Leaf Blade takes it out, and from here my Jump Bluff up a shield will be able to close out this game with this Energy Ball, as we take game 3 on top and move on to the 5th round. GG's to my opponent. Now getting into the 5th round against my opponent, Dub1916, who's running Kofa, Malamar, Shadow Aggron, Pelipper, Shadow Shiftry, and Tyrant. Again, first look, my DD seems very strong. As long as I can keep it away from their Malamar and Kofa, it does well against the Shadow Aggron, the Peli, the Shadow Shiftry, the Tyrant, as you know we've already previously established. The interesting part about the Shadow Shiftry matchup though is how DD wins all evens against regular Shiftry, it loses the ones against Shadow Shiftry. So that's something that I had to keep in mind while playing throughout these battles or in other tournaments when I come across a Shadow Shiftry. But my opponent does have an interesting pick. It's the first time we've seen it in this tournament, that being Malamar. And Malamar actually does pretty well against my team, as it beats Kofa in the zeros, has the superpowers for the Tyrant, has the superpower for the Shiftry, destroys DD with the foul plays, while Jump Bluff and Peli are more neutral. So I don't really have a hard check to it. So based off that, I expect the Malamar to come pretty much every game, or at least the majority of it. And even if it doesn't, it's always best to prepare for it just in case, because you don't want to be caught and be in a very bad position because of that. So based off that, looking at these lines, my Peli seems pretty decent here. It's a good generalist against their line. I do have a Tyrant and Shadow Aggron, but like I said before, Peli can guarantee a shield against the Shadow Aggron, and 2 Weather Balls is just about enough to take out Tyrant when you add the wing attacks to it. So Peli's a good generalist here. Kofa, as always, is a decent generalist. DD does well against the majority of their team, so would have to dance around based off of that. And my own Jump Bluff is decent here as well. Now getting into the first match, I lead Peli into Tyrant. So this isn't where we want to see the opposing Tyrant, and so I'm going to immediately safe swap into my Kofa, as I'm banking on them not running that Shiftry this first game if they're leading their Tyrant. So that way my Kofa has a good chance of getting Switch or taking out the Tyrant. If I'm able to get Switch, I can align my DD to it. I do bait with a Dark Pulse and get their first shield. And here, I wanted to get this Dark Pulse off just before they reach their next move, because I wasn't going to quite be able to reach the Shadow Claw in time. Which thankfully I am. And their Dragon Claw is just not enough to take it out, and we are able to get Switch advantage, which is very fortunate for us, because now we can align our Pelly to their Kofa instead of our DD, and hopefully our DD has a good matchup against whatever's in the back. I do correctly showed up the Shadow Ball, and I go in for the Weather Ball bait here. Kind of a little bit of a choreographed bait, and my opponent knows that they do well, and they actually end up catching this Weather Ball onto their own Pelly, and that's quite a bit unfortunate, as I do waste that energy. But the good news is that puts their Pelipper in just about Rock Slide range now, so that does warrant their final shield. Now my opponent is going to be able to land a Hurricane against my DD. DD's tanky, it's able to hang on and get to this Rock Slide, but we lose CMP. And now my own Pelipper is going to have to put in a ton of work in this matchup. I need to get to the back-to-back Weather Balls here and hope that the first one KOs the Pelipper and the second one KOs the Kofa, as the Kofa did leave with a move, so I am going to have to throw right away since Pelly does win CMP. First Weather Ball just barely takes out their Pelly, and does the second one take out their Kofa? No, the Kofa just barely hangs on, and they have the move to take me out. Very well played to my opponent. Very close game, but now we do drop the first match, and we're going to have to win the next two to stay alive and stay in it. See how it goes. Next match, I lead the Kofa into Shiftry. Absolutely terrible lead. Couldn't get any worse at this point. So I'm going to safe swap into my own Pelly, and luckily they don't have the Tyrant to counter my Pelly. Instead, it's their own Malamar. And now this one's doable. This one I am able to flip switch on. I will have to go down a shield in the process though. As here I do shield up the Shadow Ball. And now I am at the back-to-back Weather Balls. So if my opponent wants a play to try and maintain alignment, they are going to have to give up a shield. See, my opponent would rather take their shield advantage or alignment. And they decide to take their shield advantage. And they have their Malamar in the back. So fortunately for me, I do get to align my Kofa to this Malamar now and my DD to that Shadow Shiftry. I do throw this Weather Ball on the CMP tie to keep my opponent from being able to overfarm. But they make a very nice play there. They undercharge, get some additional energy on their Malamar. And this is still going to be a very, very close end game. So I'm going to throw this Dark Pulse right away to take out their Malamar, but my opponent makes a brilliant catch onto their Shiftry, but they still end up shielding it because, again, it is a Shadow Shiftry, and they recognize that HP on their Shiftry is going to be very important to them. I do shield up the Foul Play, and I'm going to throw the Psycho Boost, which should just about be enough to take out that Shiftry, but they commit a shield. So now I'm going to have to eat this Shadow Foul Play, which does so much damage to the bulky DD. We're just barely able to get to the counter down, and I have to commit to the Rock Slide right there because a triple resisted Psycho Boost that is double debuffed will most definitely not be able to take out a Malamar from that range. So, but fortunately for us, we're just barely able to hang on and take that one in a very close match. And we head into a decisive game 3 where I decide to go with a DD lead, calling that they aren't going to lead their own Kofa. And fortunately, I do make the right call. Now, they do safe swap in the Kofa to catch the Rock Slide, but I do have to throw that anyways to get some chip damage, as I don't have a great answer to their Kofa. But now, since I got that Rock Slide chip damage, this should just be about an Acrobatics range. So I'm going to load up, throw this Acrobatics before they get to another Shadow Ball. Is it going to be enough? It's just not enough. My opponent reaches another move. I will commit a shield here because they do have enough for a Shadow Ball, and a Shadow Ball would just about take me out. But they actually go for the Dark Pulse. A little bit of an interesting play. Would have been nice to no shield that. But either way, we are able to leave this matchup with a ton of energy and guarantee that shield back against this Tyrant. As the first energy ball does get a shield, and my opponent has to throw the Dragon Claw here, otherwise I would get to another energy ball. So now I can align my DD to this Tyrant, and my Pelipper will then be on their Pelipper. As that Dragon Claw isn't going to be enough to take me out, my opponent makes a great play here, being able to snipe with their Weather Ball and winning CMP. And I have a ton of energy. I need to save this. So I'm going to throw this Rock Slide in return. Throw one more counter, swap, and catch the Weather Ball onto my own Pelly. So now this is going to be a race to the Hurricane. We're both going to get there at the same time. So it's going to come down to a CMP tie, which I was running. My opponent actually cops out into a Weather Ball in this matchup, which is very fortunate for me, as I can now overfarm, get to the Hurricane to take out the Pelly, and we'll be able to see if I can get to this Weather Ball just in time, which I am. And will this be enough to take out the Tyrant? If it's not, I still do have the Psycho Boost stored on my DD, but it is, and we're able to take the decisive game 3. But yeah, for those exact reasons in that race right there, if he did commit to the Hurricane, I ran a high attack Pelipper specifically to win the CMP ties in this cup, because Pelipper was basically on every single team. But with that win, we're now the only undefeated one left going into round 6, and we're going to see if we can take the sweep, or if my opponent will be sharing in that title with me. And that opponent is going to be Diorosaur, who's running a line of Pelipper, Jumpluff, Shiftry, Lurantis, Shadow Aggron, and Runerigus. And my Pelipper just looks absolutely amazing here. Triple Grass, Ground type in Rune, Shadow Aggron, which has to give up a shield in the zeros, and then the Pelipper, their Pelipper, which I'm most likely going to win CMP against. Just, my Pelly just gonna absolutely pop off. Other than that, my own Kofa seems pretty good, other than their Shiftry. My own Tyrant with some fast move pressure would just have to avoid their Lurantis, as Lurantis does have access to superpower and can also spam off those Leaf Blades. My own Jumpluff here is pretty decent, would just need to avoid their Pelly and Shadow Aggron. My Shiftry is looking really good, as they are, like I said, running Triple Grass. I can hit super effective against the Rune, not with just the foul plays, but with the Leaf Blades too. I would just need to watch out for the Jumpluff, and if I get any sort of energy advantage, the Leaf Blades add up against her Pelly. And my own DD is very strong here too. Just need to watch out for the Lurantis and the Runerigus. And with that, let's get right into the final battles of the tournament. Getting into the first battle, we lead my Pelly into their Lurantis. This is a really good lead for us, as we are able to hit for super effective with the wing attacks, and they are absolutely chunking. The bad news is the Lurantis gets these Leaf Blades really quickly, and they do hurt, so I am most likely going to have to end up giving up a shield, which you'll see I will right here. And since my opponent is staying in, I'm also reading that they are going to be double weak to the Pelly. But I'm going to load up. I do go over 100 energy right here, as I was seeing if I could commit to the wing attack down, but I can't quite. So I will give up my final shield right here, and then wing attack down all the way. See what my opponent wants to come in with. It is going to be the Shadow Aggron, and if we survive this smackdown, which we do, yeah, we do. I am going to be able to get off this next Weather Ball to take out that Shadow Aggron or force their final shield. And if you'll notice right here, instead of coming in with DD to counter down, I actually come in with Kofa. The reason why is because if I come in with DD and they have their Rune in the back, they safe swap in their Rune, I would then counter swap with my Kofa, but now I'm behind a Shadow Claw and I'm going to get outpaced the Shadow Ball. But if I come in with my Kofa right there, and then they safe swap their rune to avoid their Aggron getting farmed down, my Kofa is just ahead of energy, so it's able to take out the rune and then can sweep the end game. But we are able to take game 1 as we head into game 2. I lead DD this time since they were double weak to the Pele on the lead last game. I was expecting them to run some sort of counter to my Pele lead, which would be their Shadow Aggron. Unfortunately, I do make the correct call. And here I go for a little bit of a Psycho Boost chip damage. I really should have just swapped into my own Pelipper right away, or at least thrown the Rock Slide, because that was kind of just a waste of energy. But either way, we are in a decent spot as I can shield this Leaf Blade. And I'll be able to survive this Smackdown to get off 2 Weather Balls again against the Aggron to get that shield back. So it wasn't a good play, but it ended up working out for us. As we, like I said, we are able to get that shield back. Actually, my opponent just decides to let it go and instead gets farm on their rune. And since I have my own Tyrant, this is okay because these Dragon Tails are going to add up. I may have a bait decision, a bait call to make here. But I am down a shield. I'm not expecting them to bait. So fortunately, I do shield the Shadow Ball correctly, as shielding a Sand Tomb would be very, very unfortunate right there. That Dragon Claw will get their first shield, and I am able to switch and catch their next Shadow Ball on my DD. That is very good for me. Next Shadow Ball doesn't quite KO as we reach the Psycho Boost to be able to guarantee that final shield off of my opponent. And they're not quite at a Shadow Ball as my Tyrant now outpaces to be able to take out the Runerigus and take game 2, officially completing the 6-0 sweep in the tournament. And we still have the third match to play. Why not end it on another good note if we can? So now I switch back to the Pele lead, go back to my game 1 line, and it does have the Shiftry in the lead. And really here, I make a very big misplay. I should have thrown the Weather Ball before. No need to Hurricane here as 2 Weather Balls do the trick, but I should have thrown the Weather Ball before they were able to get to the back-to-back Leaf Blades, because now I go for the farm down. I'm just not going to be able to get it, so I do throw this Weather Ball. But now I'm going to be able to go down with all this energy, almost 2 Weather Balls stored. So that's a very big misplay on my part. But I am able to get a nice little Shadow Claw down on my Kofa, so potentially allowing us to play back in this match. And they come in with a Lurantis, and Lurantis, Kofa can survive a Leaf Blade, but Lurantis is not going to appreciate a Shadow Ball at all. So I'm going to throw this Shadow Ball right before they get to their next Leaf Blade. And if it is their own rune in the back, then that is kind of unfortunate, and I did throw this match from that misplay against the Shiftry there with my Pele, and it does end up being the rune, so that's kind of unfortunate, but we're still going to play it out. We're going to see what we can do in return. My win condition here is actually calling a bait, but I'm not expecting them to bait at all, so I shield. Really, I should have baited, and my opponent actually does bait, and instead of Sand Tomb, they're running Rock Tomb, which is actually an even more expensive move than Shadow Ball. So because they are running Rock Tomb, we do still have a chance if we are able to Shadow Claw down in time. But again, I really should have called that, as my win condition was calling a bait, as now this Shadow Ball does take me out. Are we able to take down the rune? The rune reaches a Shadow Ball just barely and is able to take us out. So my opponent is able to take the third game. GG's to them and well played, but we do take the overall 2-1 and complete the 6-0 sweep in the tournament. So a very long one for you guys today, but I hope you enjoyed it, as I wanted to make sure I got some more Silph content out there, especially since this is its final season and I'm making a big leaderboard push. If you stayed with me this long, I can't thank you enough, and it really does mean a lot to me. Let me know what you thought about these battles, the Arcana meta, or just your thoughts on Silph down below in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.